several polls have confirmed that former President Trump ended up at about just over 30,000 lies during his administration. And half of them came during the final year when he was more desperate. I mean, it came on things like COVID. It came on things like the economy. And by the way, for the record, there was greater job growth during the last 3 years of the Obama administration than there was during the first 3 years of the Trump administration. So this greatest economy ever think is BS, because we still had 2% growth. And, it goes on and on. And so, but of course, the biggest lie is the one about the election. So obviously, you don't believe the election was stolen, right?
I mean, I think
yes
that,
or no?
I think that there were lots of things that happened
No, Perry, it's a yes or
were
no
not
question.
in the
Come on.
Constitution.
You can say the irregularities, but either you believe it was stolen or it wasn't. So can you give me a yes or no answer?
He lost the court ruling. So in that way, yes, he lost. But do I agree with everything that happened leading up to the court rulings? No.
But was the election stolen? Yes or no? Okay,
Dave, that's
you're not going to answer it. I mean, I think that's kind of.
What do you mean?
Okay. It's all right. Well, it's all right. I mean, so I guess that leads to the second part of my question. And maybe I guess in the ecosystem, if you say the election was stolen, you get a scarlet letter or something. But I guess my question is, you may have heard about Mo Brooks, who's that congressman who was at the January 6th rally. I mean, he's one of the worst, right? And surprise, surprise, because loyalty with Donald Trump is 100% his way, 0 your way. Trump just threw him under the bus. And no one really knows why. The poll numbers were down, but people feel part of the reason was because he had the temerity to say, oh my God, ready for this? We should look past the 2020 election. We should look at the future, not the past. So what's your advice to these Republican candidates that can't talk about, and granted, the Republican Party doesn't really stand for anything these days, so there's not much to talk about, but they can't talk about the future when the only criterion for Trump's support is relitigating, how he was ripped off on the election. What's your advice to these candidates?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm on Trump's listserv, and I got that statement when he withdrew his nomination. And one thing he said in the statement, he didn't like him saying we shouldn't focus on 2020. And I disagree with that. I think that you should, focus on the future. I mean, that's what the American people want. So I disagree with Trump on that. But the other thing is that I think the reason Trump did it is because Mo Brooks has been a terrible candidate since he's declared. He's tanked. He's completely squandered a substantial lead that he had. And also part of it is because there's a very strong female opponent who I believe Trump is going to actually end up endorsing in the end, who's much younger, hungrier, and just a better candidate, more disciplined. And I think that's really why Trump is doing it, because he doesn't want his record from an endorsement standpoint to be sullied. So I think that's all coming into play in this situation.
Well, and again, I am known for giving gratuitous advice to Democratic candidates. Here's a what I think, good piece of advice. One of the most under-noticed statistics has been since Donald Trump left office, the percentage of Republicans who think he should run again has dropped from over 70% to under 50%. So this presents an opportunity for Democrats to re-engage with these working class voters that they discarded. And that means not being preachy. That means talking to them about issues that affect their lives, because they proved in 2018 where there's very little daylight between Trump voters and them is on kitchen table issues. So let's see if the Dems, which again, they're great at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, let's see if they can actually take advantage of this. And a lot of the candidates that Trump is endorsing aren't doing very well. So can the Dems seize the opportunity? What do you think?
We'll see. But I know that Emerson College, which is no right-wing institution, actually just did some polling, and they found that Trump would win in a matchup against Joe Biden, and that Biden's favorability has tanked severely. So I think that there is certainly momentum, because it turns out that at the top of the segment, you mentioned the quote unquote lies of Trump. It turns out that so many things that Trump has said that the mainstream media No, as in like things that the mainstream media call lies actually end up being true. For example, the Hunter Biden laptop. 17 months later, now the New York Times verifies something. Twitter destroyed any mention of that story from the New York Post. Also, things with the origin of COVID. Did it come out of a lab or did it come out of a wet market? Anything where there was any suggestion that this was created in a lab by the CCP was marked as misinformation. So, and then the whole Russia collusion thing. Jim Comey, all of it was lies that were manufactured by the left. And so, I think that's why voters are they're seeing, the fig leaf that the mainstream media puts to try to, cover for Joe Biden and to assault Donald Trump. But again, this is Emerson polling. I think that there's an opportunity for Trump, but I think, Ron DeSantis, perhaps, or where I live here in Virginia, Glenn Youngkin. I think there's a lot of opportunity for other candidates too. Whoever it is, I will end up supporting, a candidate who is going to stand up to Joe Biden, because to me, he's been a disaster. There are, hundreds of thousands and now millions of Afghanis who are at risk now because of Joe Biden's failure. And the assault of the Ukrainian people happened under Joe Biden's watch. So whoever it is going to be better, light years ahead of Joe Biden.
Well,
that's what I believe.
Remember one thing, folks. One of the most ridiculous things I've heard, if Donald Trump were president, this would have never happened. Putin would have never invaded. You're right. He wouldn't have had to, because Trump would have been on his way to dismantling NATO. So Trump was doing his work. The reason that Putin invaded was because now NATO is stronger. Biden's reversing a lot of this stuff. So, and as far as the lies go, all I can say is that you can focus on Hunter Biden and some of the ancillary stuff, but when it came to main stuff like the economy, and all that, and particularly things about the election, the lies were definitely there. Well, anyway, we'll have to leave it at that. Another great conversation. Thanks so much for joining us on Practically Political, and we'll see you next time.